Welcome back, aliens. My name is Naveen Reddy, and let's continue with the series on Python. In the last video, we have talked about the theory of objects and a class, right? So of course, before creating an object, you need to create a class, right? Because class is a design for the object, and if you don't have a design, how can you build something? In fact, even before building a tower, you need to create a blueprint of it, right? And that's the same case here. So if you want an object, you need to create a class. So what I'm talking about is, let's say I want to work with computers. So I'm a person, I want to work with a computer. So of course I want an object of a computer, right? So let's say I'm a programmer, and of course I want to work with a computer. So I will say comp1. So this is my computer. But see, the thing is, till this point we have worked with integers, we have worked with float, string. Now all those are inbuilt types, right? We don't have any type as computer. So of course we need to create our own type. So we have to create our own class for it. So if you want to use a computer, you need to define a class here. So how do we define a class? The way we define a function is by saying def and function name. The way we define a class is using a class keyword. So we have to say class, and this class will of course have a name. In this case, I will use a name as computer. Okay, now this is how you define a class. You have to specify a colon. Now after colon, this is your suite, right? So this is where you will mention your stuff. Now what stuff we can put in a class? Two things. The first thing is the attributes. The second one is the behavior. Oh, now when you say attribute, it is your variables, okay, the way you create variables. And the next thing we'll be having here is behavior, which is methods. What is methods? Functions. The functions which we are using from a long time, but here we call them as methods. So next time when you are calling a function, but that function is a part of a class, instead of calling them as functions, we have to say methods, right? Okay, now let's define some methods here. Now what method I'm talking about? If I say, let me create a method here, I will say def, I will say config, because every machine has a configuration, right? So I will say config. We got that self keyword. That's weird. What is self? Because see, I'm not typing it, okay? So, the moment I say bracket, it says self. We'll talk about that self later, but time being, let's keep it there. You can imagine we don't have any self there, okay? For time being, imagine we don't have anything like self. Okay, and here we'll say we got a computer class, and then we got a config method, or you can say function, but try to move from that function term to method term. Right, so we got a method here which is config, and here I'm printing the config of this machine, and I want to say, hey, this is i5 machine with 16 GB RAM, and it has 1 terabyte hard drive. Now this is very common config now which we find nowadays, right? And that's what I'm doing here. So we got a class computer, we got a method in that. Example here, I'm saying comp1 is the object of computer, but we cannot simply do that, right? We cannot simply say comp1 because no one will understand what this comp1 is. Example, if I say there's a variable a, what is a type of this variable, right? Now since in Python we don't have to statically mention the type of it, so what we can do is when you say a equal to 5, now the type of a becomes integer, right? If I say a is 5.5, the type of a becomes float. If I assign a value of string type, if I say 8, even if that 8 is number, we are putting that in single quote, right? That becomes a string. What about comp1? Comp1 here don't have a type. We have to mention, hey, this comp1 is an object of computer. In that case, you will say equal to computer, and you have to give this round brackets. Now if you are coming from another, from different programming background like Java, C#, we have a concept of constructor, right? So this is a constructor there. So this will give you the object of computer. Now how do I know that? If you remember, in one of the video we have talked about a type function, right? So you can use type function here. So I will say print, I will define type, print the type of conp1. Let's see what happens, what it gives you. So if I run this code, it says, hey, this is a class, okay? Now we have a different keyword class, and this belongs to a computer. That's important, okay? So it gives you the module name. The module name is main because we are running this code from here. And then we have a class called as computer. Now if you remember, when we worked with string as well, string gives the same thing. So if I print the type of a, it also says the same thing. Can you see that? It says class str, right? So we are using this concept from a long time, but this is where we are defining it now. So string str is also a class, the same way computer is a class. The difference is str is an inbuilt class, computer is our class, okay? That's how you define it. So you say class, computer, and then we have def, config. In fact, there is one more thing. If you remember, when we worked with integers, we have also said that integers are also object. Let's try it here. I will say x equal to 9, and let me print the type of x. Can you see that? When I print the type of x, it says class int. So even this integer, this x, is an object of integer now, right? So everything is object in Python, right? So there are some inbuilt objects and there are some objects which we create. And the way you create your own class is by saying class, computer, whatever class name. Make sure that you don't use inbuilt class name because it will give you error. Right? Or maybe you might face some bugs. So we have, so in a class we are defining a function config and then, not function, method config, and then we are printing just a statement. Now question arises, how will you call it? So let me remove all this extra stuff which we are doing. So we got a class, we got the object, I want to call that config. Now what do you think? How will you do it? So normally when you have a function, you mention the function name, right? Here in this case it is config, but you are getting an error. Why error? So if I go back here, it says unresolved reference. Oh, that's weird. Why it is giving you unresolved? Because of course, normally till this point, we were mentioning the function as it is, right? Open. But now we have written that function or a method inside a class. So in order to access that, we have to mention the class name. And the class name here is computer. So we have to say computer.config. Important. So steps, remember the steps. You have to mention the computer class, which is class name, and then you have to say config. So let me repeat. If you want to use a method, we have to mention a class name first, which is, where it belongs to computer, and then you have to mention config. And if I run this code, oh, we got an error. But why? See, think about this. One class can have multiple objects, right? One object, two objects, five objects, maybe billions of objects, right? In this case, we are using only one object, which is comp1. The thing is, this config function or a method will change its behavior based on the object, right? Because different objects have a different behavior, because depending upon what they know, they have a different behavior. See, in this case, I'm not depending on any data, right? But maybe there's a chance that this config will depend upon some data, and every object will have its own data. Right, again, we'll talk about that later. But every object is different, right? If I'm calling config, for which object I'm doing that? So if I say, hey, walk, but whom I'm supposed to say walk? So I have to mention, hey, Ravi, walk. Hey, Mukesh, walk. Hey Kiran, walk. So I have to mention the names as well, right? In the same way, when I say computer config, you have to also mention for which object you're talking about. And I'm talking about comp1. So I'm saying, hey, I want the config for comp1. Now, luckily, we have only one object here, so there's no confusion. But let's say if you have thousands of objects, you have to mention the object name as well. So we are doing comp1 here. So if I run this code now, it works. You can see that we got the output. So we are calling config and we are passing comp1. And this comp1 is a parameter, right? It's an argument. So when you call config, you're passing this comp1 as the argument and it is going in self. So what is this self? Self is the object which you're passing. Again, this thing will get more clear once you see further videos, right? So this is a complex concept if you're learning OOPS for the first time, but step by step, everything will go inside your brain, okay? So this is the first layer. Again, in the next video, we'll talk about some more layers to it. We'll add more layers and then I will make sure that you get everything about it. Okay, let's create some more objects, okay? So I will say comp2 is equal to computer, right? So we got comp1, we got comp2. So in total, we have two objects, which is comp1 and comp2. But we have only one class, which is computer. If I want to call config for comp2, what you will do? You will say computer.config, and this time you're saying, hey, I want to call config for comp2. So in the first instance, I'm saying Mukesh walk, right? Or I will say, hey human walk, in bracket I'm passing Mukesh. I will say, hey human walk, in bracket I'm passing Ravi, right? In the same way here, I'm saying, hey computer, show me your configuration, and I'm talking about comp1. Hey computer, I want your configuration for comp2. So if I run this code, you can see we are getting same data because at this point we are not changing data for different objects. We can do that later. So there's one way, right? If you want to call config, we have another way. If you think about this, this looks good, right? This looks clean because we are saying, hey, config method belongs to computer, and then we have to pass the object name, which is comp1. But there's one more way. What you can do is you can mention comp1.config. Now, in this case, you are using the object itself to call the function. So you're saying comp1.config. But question is, we are not passing it, right? Example, let's do it for comp2 as well. I will say comp2.config. And you can see this time I'm not passing anything inside config and still it works. You can see the output, it works. We got 4 times the same data because the first 2 is because of this lines and the next 2 is because of this line, right? But why it is working? It's because this is another behavior of it. So when you say comp1.config, you are calling config. See, we are specifying of which class it is, right? So comp1 belongs to computer. So now we know config belongs to computer. The moment you say comp1.config, when you're calling it behind the scene, this config will take comp1 as a parameter. So behind the scene, config will take that comp1 as an argument and it will pass that in self. Okay, so in most of the code you will see this type of syntax, not this one. But I have done this just to explain you how this syntax linked like, okay, so how this exactly works. But normally we use this syntax, the second one. And that's why whatever we have done till now, example, if I work with a variable of int size, so if I say a equal to 5 and if I say a dot, so whatever function we use here, example, I want to know the bit length. Now in this thing you can see if I say control space, you can actually see the documentation by clicking on this control and click on the function name. So press control and click on the function name. You can see it takes you to the function, it says bit length self. So as a definition it is accepting self, but when you are passing it, when you're calling bit length, we are not passing it. So this a is an object, right? It goes as a parameter. So self is the object which you are passing. We'll discuss more about that once we start with variables and then attributes, all the stuff. But time being, this is how you create a class and that's how you create an object. I hope this session was a bit helpful. So let me know in the comment section. Do subscribe for further videos. That's it everyone. Bye-bye.